There are moments in life when people just want one simple thing to return home. But sometimes, in those seemingly peaceful moments, an unexpected adversity hits us like a slap in the face to our self-esteem. At the Denver airport on a chilly afternoon, Dr. Naomi Carter, a black female CEO who had just completed a $2.1 billion deal, just wanted to sit in her seat 1A and close her eyes for a few hours. However, as she stepped onto the plane, a dry sentence stopped her in her tracks. Ma'am, first class is not for passengers who were mistakenly upgraded. If it were you faced with the suspicious looks and the sarcastic words of a man taking your place, what would you do? Would you silently ignore it? Or would you stand up for yourself for your honor? Before the story begins, if you feel this journey can touch someone, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to join me on this fateful flight. That afternoon at Denver International Airport, the wind carried the chill of approaching winter. Long lines at check-in, the rustle of suitcases on tile floors, the smell of hastily brewed coffee in the air, all of it harmonized into the soundtrack of a busy flight day. Amidst the bustle, Dr. Naomi Carter walked in a complete contrast to the chaos. She was not flashy, not in a sharp suit, not in any way a CEO who had just acquired a $2.1 billion airline. Just a black woman, her face tired but calm, wearing a light gray wool coat and dark jeans, her sneakers a little worn. She liked it blending into the crowd. No one knew her. No one wanted anything from her. No one looked at her the way they looked at a black female CEO, with admiration, suspicion, expectation, and wariness. Naomi pulled her small suitcase, stopped in front of the glass door, and looked at the darkening sky. It had been a long day, a long week, a deal that had kept her working almost without sleep for 96 hours. But today, it was finally over. In a few hours, she would be back in Charlotte where her daughter was waiting. She held back a sigh. Sometimes victory was exhausting. While waiting for boarding, Naomi received a text message from her daughter. Mom, remember to call me when you get off the plane. She smiled a rare smile all day. Okay, Mom will call. How are you today? Fine, Mom. But I want you to get more rest. Okay, Mom, I promise. Naomi put her phone away, rubbing her eyes. No one looking at her would guess that this simple woman had the power to decide the fate of thousands of employees at a major airline. No one knew she was the one who had just signed a historic agreement. No one knew that she had grown up in a working-class Atlanta neighborhood, and now she was one of the few black female CEOs in America. She was used to it, used to being judged by her looks, used to the judging looks, used to having to prove her worth, sometimes even when she was already at the top. But today, she didn't want to prove anything. She just wanted to sit quietly in her seat, drink a glass of water, pull up the thin blanket, and sleep. That's all. The announcement rang out, first-class passengers may now board. Naomi stood up. She got in line, not pushing, not rushing, just like her calm, quiet. When she reached the plane's gate, she met the chief flight attendant, Linda Rodriguez, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and a smile that was only mechanical politeness. Boarding pass, Linda asked without looking at Naomi, just holding out her hand. Naomi handed over the phone. Linda looked at it, frowning slightly. Seat 1A. Her voice was tinged with disbelief. Are you sure? Naomi just nodded. Yes, I'm sure. Linda rolled her eyes quickly, not long enough to be rude, but long enough for Naomi to notice. The look said something Linda couldn't put into words. She didn't look like the person sitting in 1A. Naomi kept her expression calm, but inside her heart clenched. A feeling she was familiar with, but never quite used to. A gentle touch on an old sore spot. Linda returned the phone, but stopped smiling. Go straight and turn left. Naomi stepped into the first-class cabin, but when she looked up at seat number 1, her heart stopped. A middle-aged white man was sitting there. No suit, but expensive branded polo shirt, a slight potbelly, the look of someone who gets good service everywhere. He was on the phone, his voice booming, as if he wanted everyone to hear, I swear, if you want good service, you pay for it. People don't understand that anymore. Naomi stood in front of the man. Excuse me, she said softly. You were sitting in my chair. The man looked up. His annoyance was evident. Are you kidding? This is 1A. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes. Naomi handed over her boarding pass. I know, but this is my seat. That was the moment it all began. The man looked Naomi up and down. His eyes were appraising, skeptical, and contemptuous. Then he smiled faintly. Lady people like you don't pay for seats like this. The sentence dropped like a heavy object hitting the floor. Naomi felt the whole cabin fall silent for a beat. Not from the noise, not from anger, but from exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who had lived her whole life with those words. Someone who had tried, and still had to hear them. She did not reply, but her heart trembled slightly. Linda entered the cabin, saw the situation, and said, "Ma'am, there seems to be a mistake. Can you go down to economy while we check?" A gentle request, but a tone everyone understood. "Get down. You don't belong here." Naomi looked at Linda. A long time, very slowly. In that look, there was pain, there was fatigue, there was reason, but absolutely no fear. She knew, in just a few seconds, the fate of the entire flight would take a completely different turn. Naomi took a deep breath. "No, I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice low, warm, and sure. "And I think you should call someone more qualified to handle this." Linda laughed. "What authority over me is there?" That question, Linda would soon regret asking. As the first-class cabin fell into that heavy silence, Naomi stood there, neither advancing nor retreating. Her appearance was calm, but deep inside her chest, old memories seemed to be opening their eyes, silently watching her. Not painful memories that wanted to make her cry, but memories that reminded her of what she had overcome to stand here. A young woman who rose from nothing but faith. A single mother who worked 2 jobs. A black woman who was rejected in an interview hall because she didn't fit the brand image. A person who walked a steep path that many didn't see or chose not to see. Perhaps that was why now, when facing Linda Rodriguez and Mark Hollings's contemptuous gaze, Naomi was not afraid. Just tired. A very real tiredness. She gently placed her hands on the back of the seat in front of her to keep her balance, then took a deep breath. Behind her, the steady sound of passengers getting into the economy cabin continued. Footsteps, suitcases being pulled, children asking their mothers why they were so slow. Those sounds made this moment seem like just a small part of the vast flow of life. But Naomi knew this wouldn't be a small piece. Not this time. Flashback to a few hours earlier to noon in Denver. Naomi had just left her final meeting with Skylift Airways' legal team. The sky was so clear she could see streaks of light on the high-rise glass of their temporary office building. "Congratulations, Naomi," her assistant Morgan said as they stood in front of the elevator. $2.1 billion. Not everyone can close that deal. Naomi smiled, slightly nodding. "Congratulations. But the hard part has only just begun." Morgan laughed. "The hardest part for you is getting some rest. It's been a long time since you've had a good night's sleep." Naomi knew he was right. For 4 nights in a row, she had slept for 2 hours at a time on the sofa in the conference room. But she was still awake. Her head was clear. Her thoughts were clear. She's used to pushing herself to the limit and exceeding. From the start of her career, it's always been the only way. When she arrived at the airport, no one recognized her. The TSA agent simply checked her ID and let her through. The cafeteria worker simply asked what size she wanted. A father holding a small child smiled apologetically when he accidentally bumped into her shoulder while looking for a seat. These normal things made Naomi feel at ease. Here, no one expected her to be strong. No one expected her to solve everything. She was just a woman trying to get home. On the boarding pass, Naomi opened her work email. The number in the corner of the screen made her curl her lips. 372 unread. A long list of requests, announcements, demands, requests for opinions, all poured into her like a flood. She turned off her phone. Rarely. Just a few hours, she told herself. "I'll take a few hours just to breathe." She took a deep breath and leaned back in her chair. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the window, bathing her cheeks in a pale yellow. She closed her eyes, and then boarding begins. Back in the first-class cabin, Naomi let out a quiet breath. In front of her, Senator Mark Hollings leaned back in his chair as if the whole thing were a small matter. Linda stood with her arms, crossed, her expression a mixture of impatience and old authority. Naomi recognized that look. The look of someone who believed he was right because he had been right for 30 years. No need to check, no need to question. People like that, she had seen many. "Ma'am," Linda said again, but her voice was firmer. "You are obstructing boarding. Please go to the back deck while I verify." Naomi was silent for a long moment, long enough for Linda to think she had given up. But Naomi was just thinking about her mother who told her there would be times when you had to stand up, even when you didn't want to. About her daughter who looked to her as a role model. About other black women who were told they didn't look like successful people. And about herself, someone who has endured too many silences. When Naomi opened her eyes, all that heavy heart shrank into a very light decision. "No," she said calmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Linda froze. Part of Naomi looked her straight in the eye. "I have a right to sit in the seat I bought. If you think I don't belong here, please call someone in higher authority." The whole space became so quiet that I could clearly hear someone pulling the zipper of a suitcase from behind. Linda chuckled. "Taller than me? There is no one taller than me on this plane." Naomi tilted her head. "Yes." A silence fell, as light as a breath, but heavy. Naomi reached into her pocket and pulled out another phone, one not for email or calendar. One for decisions that couldn't wait. Linda looked at the phone, not understanding what was happening. Naomi understood very well. Sometimes people do not choose adversity, but people can choose how they stand in that adversity. She touched a single number. "Check again," she said to Linda, her voice soft but firm as steel. "I'm not who you think I am." And that was just the beginning. In the moment Naomi raised her phone, the Skylift first-class cabin seemed to stop. Not because the plane was about to close its doors, or because the premium leather seats were emitting a faint scent of new material, but because something very small, very still, but carrying the weight of long years all at once. Linda Rodriguez, who had been on hundreds of flights for 30 years, looked at Naomi in disbelief, as if the black woman in the plain sweater was trying too hard to appear important. "What do you think you're doing?" Linda asked, her arms still crossed. Naomi didn't answer right away. She looked at the phone in her hand, then slowly set it down beside her. "No call. Just kept it there. As a reminder. As an unspoken way of saying that she was not who Linda thought she was." Senator Mark Hollings sat behind Naomi, smacking his lips loudly. "Come on, Linda," he said, his voice haughty and tired, as if interrupted by an important conversation. "If she wants to cause trouble, let her go back to the gate. There's no time for this kind of trouble." When he said the word trouble, he glanced at Naomi exactly once. A quick glance, a sharp one. A glance Naomi had known since school. A glance that said the woman standing here was a problem. In that moment, Naomi did not get angry, but inside her heart an old door opened. She recalls being 19 years old, applying for a waitressing job at a small Atlanta restaurant. The manager looked her up and down and said, "We need someone who looks like our customers." She remembered the day she attended her MBA graduation ceremony, when two men sitting behind her whispered, "Just because of quota." She remembered the first time she took the elevator at Skylift headquarters. The security guard stopped her. The housekeeping staff go through the back door. She had overcome it all. But no wound, no matter how old it is. Just a light touch is enough to sting. Naomi stood still for a long time, letting the pang pass without shaking her from her composure. Linda sighed as if out of patience. "Ma'am," she said, "I'll say it one last time. Please leave the first-class cabin to await verification. The flight needs to depart on time. You're disturbing the other passengers." Several other passengers began to look at Naomi. None were hostile, but their eyes were filled with speculation. They had no idea who she was. They just saw a woman standing in the aisle confronting the crew. In moments like these, society always assumes the person standing still is the troublemaker. Naomi knew that. She had lived by this lesson all her life. But knowing doesn't always mean accepting. She looked up, looking straight at Linda. "I didn't leave the chair I paid for," Naomi said. "If you think there's a mistake, you should take it up with the right people, not me." "Related person," Linda frowned. Naomi gently but firmly pointed at Senator Hollings. Linda was a little startled. Naomi said. "He's in the wrong chair." At that moment, Senator Hollings laughed, a laugh mixed with defiance. "Lady," he said, "I don't have to prove anything to you." Naomi tilted her head, her voice calm. "No, but she does." Linda met Naomi's eyes. A touch that made Linda uncomfortable, as if Naomi were seeing through her long-standing veneer of authority. "We know our passengers," Linda said firmly. "Mr. Hollings is first class. You are not." Several passengers nearby murmured, not because they knew anything, but because the remark sounded strange. Naomi asked again slowly, saying each word. You mean, looking at me, you think I can't sit in seat 1? Linda was speechless. The air thickened. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The unintentional words, the nameless prejudices all seemed to hang in that moment. Ma'am, I didn't say that, Linda protested. I just said no need to explain, Naomi interrupted softly. We all know what you're thinking. Linda opened her mouth, but couldn't speak. The sentence was like a mirror, and Linda caught sight of her own face in it. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the engine starting. Senator Hollings suddenly stood up and waved his hand. Linda, let's get this over with. I have a meeting as soon as I get to New York. I can't sit here and watch her argue with you. Naomi turned to look at him, a small but observant look. Mr. Hollings, said Naomi, I'm not arguing. I'm just asking for what I paid for. He sneered again. No one will believe you. Naomi tilted her head slightly. How are you sure? Because he lowered his voice, but it was audible. People like you have no say in things like this. Something inside Naomi broke, not in a collapsing way, but in a door-slamming way. There is no turning back. Linda held out her hand toward Naomi, as if to push her out of the way. Ma'am, go down to economy now. Naomi looked at the hand. A second, then 2. When she looked up, her eyes were different. No more fatigue. There was only a very sharp calmness. You have no authority to do that, Naomi said. Linda curled her lips. So, who has it? Naomi did not respond verbally. She simply picked up the phone and dialed a single number in her contacts, a number no one in the cabin could guess. When the bell rang, someone in economy class stopped talking. A passenger in row 2B looked up. No one knew what was waiting. Naomi put the phone to her ear, her voice low and clear. Robert. It's me, Naomi. We have a problem on flight 209. Linda was stunned. Senator Hollings frowned. Passengers held their breath. Naomi continued, activate Protocol Phoenix. Immediately. That sentence was like a thunderbolt. Not much, but enough to change the trajectory of the entire flight. The phone rang briefly, just a few low notes, but in the first-class cabin, it sounded like a storm signal. No one knew who Naomi Carter was calling, but the way she stood erect, the calm in her voice, it made one feel like something bigger was happening. Linda Rodriguez glanced toward the plane door, then at Naomi, trying to hide the turmoil in her heart. Robert, it's me. Naomi repeated, her voice low but unwavering. We have a problem on flight 209 Denver, New York. I need you to listen carefully. There was a short silence on the other end of the line. Then, a man's voice rang out, somewhat surprised. Naomi, you mean you were on that flight? Naomi looked straight at Linda. Yes. And I'm being denied seat 1A. She paused for a second, long enough for everyone in the cabin to feel the reversal. Robert, activate Protocol Phoenix. Linda frowned, as if trying to parse those 3 words. Protocol Phoenix, she had never heard of that procedure before. In 30 years as a flight attendant, she knew every code, every emergency procedure, every safety instruction like the back of her hand, but these 3 words were completely foreign. Phoenix, what? Linda asked, her voice higher than usual. Naomi didn't look at her. She kept her eyes straight ahead, as if she were looking through the fuselage across Denver as it faded into dusk. Robert, Naomi said. Affirmed. No hesitation, no questions. On the other end of the line, Robert Keene, COO of Skylift Airways, replied in a voice as firm as steel. Confirmed. Protocol Phoenix will be activated immediately on Flight 209. All crew suspended. Naomi. Are you okay? Naomi smiled slightly. I'm fine. But we need a new team within 15 minutes. Understood. She hung up. At that moment, Senator Hollings jumped up from his chair, his eyes wide. What did you just do? He almost shouted. Naomi turned back, her gaze as calm as the lake's surface in the morning. Do what I have the right to do. Linda swallowed, feeling the ground beneath her feet shift. What is Protocol Phoenix? She asked, her voice less confident now. Naomi replied, without missing a beat. A procedure for the emergency suspension of flight crew in the event of a serious violation. Particularly applicable when it involves professional ethics or discrimination. Linda paled. A single word hit her where she never thought it would: discrimination. 5 seconds later, a sound came from next to the cabin door. The interphone from the ground team. Two airport security personnel entered, followed by a Skylift representative with an electronic board in hand. Murmurs spread throughout the cabin. Skylift man speaks up, "I am Francis Miller's supervising ground officer. Per headquarters direction, the entire crew of Flight 209 will be replaced immediately." Linda rolled her eyes and turned to Naomi. You can't do that. I'm the head stewardess. I have 30 years' experience." Naomi looked at her, revealing a hint of pity for the first time, as if she were looking at someone who didn't understand that she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. "You have 30 years of experience," Naomi said slowly. "But it only takes 30 seconds to lose it." Senator Hollings walked towards Naomi, his voice annoyed. "Lady, you have no authority to do this. I will call the Skylift Council directly," and let Naomi raised her hand, slightly signaling him to stop. A small gesture, but powerful. "You can call whoever you want," Naomi said. "But no one has more authority than the CEO of the company." "Except the CEO." The whole cabin was silent. Linda paused. Senator Hollings gasped. The passenger in seat 2A, a silver-haired woman, exclaimed so softly that only she could hear, "Oh my God, she's the CEO." The gazes that had just been assessing Naomi now changed completely. No more doubt. No more contempt, only shock. Naomi stood there, not arrogant, not asserting her power, not raising her voice. Just standing as she was, someone who had learned to keep her cool even when she was hurt. Security teams stepped up. "Miss Rodriguez," the ground manager said, "please take your personal belongings and leave the aircraft immediately." Linda trembled with anger. "No, I want to speak to the top management. I want to see." Naomi gently interjected, "You are talking to the highest authority." Linda staggered back a step. Her mouth opened, but she couldn't speak. Senator Hollings shouted, "You're not getting away with this. I'm the senator for this state." "I'm going to." Naomi turned to look at him. "You're not suspended," she said softly. "You're just being asked to return a chair that doesn't belong to you." A strange scene unfolded. A powerful man, accustomed to being favored all his life, standing awkwardly before a simple black woman without jewelry, without protection, only absolute self-control. "It's not power that silences you. It's the truth." He slowly picked up his bag, avoiding Naomi's eyes, and stepped back from seat 1A. As the old crew was let off the plane, Naomi took her seat. For the first time since the incident began, she leaned back in her seat, her shoulders relaxing. A long silence. No victory. No relief. Just the serenity of someone who has just chosen the right thing, not because she enjoys confrontation, but because she cannot stay silent. The woman in seat 2B leaned forward and said softly, "You are so brave." Naomi shook her head slightly. "It's not courage. It's just, I'm too tired to take another insult today." The woman nodded. "Sometimes women like us just want to be treated right." Naomi smiled. "Yes, a simple sentence, but contains a lifetime of experience." 5 minutes later, a completely new crew entered the cabin. Their shoulders were still streaked with afternoon sunlight, and their faces showed a mixture of tension and effort to remain calm. The new head flight attendant, a young man in his late 20s, bowed slightly to the passengers and then approached Naomi. "Hello, Mrs. Carter. This is Samuel Reeves. We will be serving this flight. We are truly sorry for your experience." Naomi looked at him gently. "It's not your fault, Samuel. But thanks." Samuel swallowed, bowed his head again, and continued walking. And then Naomi looked out the cabin window. The sun had set, leaving a deep orange line on the Denver horizon. It was a scene so beautiful, it made everything that had just happened seem a little further away. She closed her eyes, quiet, to give my heart a break, because she didn't know the real storm had yet to begin. As the new crew settled in and the plane doors closed, Naomi felt like she could finally relax. A deep, slow breath, as if releasing a few layers of tension. She closed her eyes, letting her body lean against the leather of seat 1A, feeling the cool air conditioning blow gently against her side. In that moment, she believed that this, as unpleasant as it was, as heavy as it was, would eventually fall away like any other daily fatigue. She could just fly to New York, see Amara, her daughter, and go home. A simple dinner, a long hug, a good night's sleep. Little did she know, the real storm had begun the moment she closed her eyes. In row 3, see inside the economy cabin, A young man around 25 years old was holding his phone in front of him, his hands shaking with excitement. The phone screen reflected his face, eyes wide open, mouth slightly open, as if he had just witnessed something terrible but extremely interesting. His name is Tyler Brooks, a TikToker with over 140,000 followers, famous for his flight drama expose videos. Though most of them are just petty arguments between passengers or slightly rude attitudes of airport staff. But this time, Tyler felt as if the heavens had sent him a gift. Video and phone records seen times. Naomi stood in front of seat 1, a calm but stern. Linda Rodriguez, red-faced, raised her voice. Senator Hollings stood to one side pointing and saying something annoyed. Naomi's voice saying, "Activate protocol Phoenix," rang out clearly. The sound of security guards entering. In the part where Linda is asked to leave the plane. Tyler captured it all, not from scratch, not completely, but enough to create the story he wanted. He clicked the upload button with the caption, "Discriminatory CEO. Fired the entire crew just because of the wrong seat. Skylift Airlines is in big trouble." 12 seconds after the video was uploaded, the first comment appeared, "What the hell? Who gave the CEO permission to act like a mafia member?" Then the second one, "Poor flight attendant." Then the third, fourth, fifth. Just like that, they just exploded like fireworks. 10 minutes later, the video reached 100,000. 20 minutes later, 850,000. Less than an hour, over 600,000. On the plane, no one knew. The storm outside was growing, and Naomi thought she was finally safe. The flight took off. The powerful roar of the engines pulled the plane away from the runway toward the Denver night sky, where the city lights were shrinking like stars running upside down below. Naomi opened her eyes at the familiar vibration, glancing out the window. The vast sky, dark blue, mixed with dark purple, a sight that calmed her heart if only for a moment. She loved this moment the plane lifted off the ground. It made her feel like everything would pass the way the sky always swallowed up the noise below. But not this time. A very slight uneasiness flashed through her heart, a premonition of a woman accustomed to living under judging gazes, accustomed to unforeseen risks. No specific reason, just intuition. And Naomi Carter's intuition is rarely wrong. At 320,000 feet, as the cabin stabilized, Samuel Reeves, the new chief flight attendant, walked over and asked Mrs. Carter, "Do you need water or a hot towel?" Naomi smiled politely. "Just water. Thank you." Samuel nodded and left. Naomi opened her phone, intending to check her email to reschedule tomorrow's meeting. But just a few seconds after the screen lit up, a series of notifications appeared continuously, like a shower times. "Naomi, have you seen this, Morgan? We're in trouble. PR team. Urgent video related to you is going viral. David. Call me back immediately. Maria, communications director." She frowned. Her heartbeat stopped for half a beat. Naomi took a deep breath, then opened the link Maria had just sent. A TikTok video pops up, and as she watched the first scene, her lips pursed slightly, not with anger, but with a very deep, very familiar pain. The video only shows the part where Linda is taken off the plane. It only shows Naomi standing straight, coldly calling suspension. It does not show the senator taking the seat. It does not show Naomi being scrutinized, being scorned. It does not show Linda's subtle but clear discrimination. Not true. Just record the moment Naomi takes action. And like all stories only half told, it turns the innocent into the villain, and the wrongdoer into the pitiful. Comments under the video rewind, "This CEO is crazy. Abuse of power. Reverse discrimination. The flight attendant looks pitiful." There was one comment that made Naomi's heart ache, even though she had been used to criticism throughout her career. Probably the type of person who thinks he's privileged just because of his skin color. Naomi put the phone down. There was a long silence. A heavy silence. But in that silence, there were no tears, no trembling. There is only one sadness, very great. The sadness of knowing that no matter how hard you try, the world will still have people looking at you through their own lenses. She wondered if the full video were posted, would people change their minds, or would they still choose the easier story? In the quiet first-class cabin, Naomi felt her heart heavy for the first time that day. Not because she regrets it, but because she understands that fighting for the truth is never simple. Samuel returned with a glass of water in his hand. "Mrs. Carter, are you okay?" Naomi looked up slightly. Her eyes softened. "It's okay," she replied, her voice low but soft. "Thank you." Samuel was confused, feeling a heaviness he didn't fully understand but respected. After he left, Naomi looked out the window again. The night sky was calm. Thin streaks of clouds drifted by like streaks of silk. The lights from the plane's wings flickered steadily. If it weren't for the storm out there, a storm of words, of misunderstandings, of social media, this flight would have been a moment Naomi took to breathe. Instead, she found herself sitting between two worlds. An outside world that misunderstood her. An inside world that tested her silent strength. She leaned her head back on the chair. Quiet, but not broken. In the economy cabin, Tyler Brooks watched the viewership skyrocket, his eyes lighting up like a child seeing holiday fireworks. "Oh my God," he whispered. "This clip is going to get 1 million views." Little did he know, behind his small action was the fate of a person, the honor of a woman who had spent her whole life building her name. You just see, viral. As for Naomi, she just felt her heart sink. A thought rang through her mind. Once again they told their story the way they wanted. And this time she knew. She wouldn't let it end like that. Not this time. Never again. Minutes after landing in New York, Naomi turned on airplane mode on her phone. And immediately, the screen was flooded with hundreds of notifications. Not the usual work-related ones, but headlines that clattered like a pounding on the door. Times Skylift CEO caught in abuse of power scandal. Asterisk viral video CEO fires flight crew just because of seats. Asterisk Skylift faces biggest PR crisis in history. Naomi was not one to panic. But her heart still sank. She hadn't said a word. She hadn't made any statement. And yet the world had told its own story. For her. When the plane came to a stop, the first person to stand up was Samuel Reeves. "Mrs. Carter, we have someone waiting for you at the gate," he said, his voice very soft. Naomi understood. The PR team found out. Scary fast, she thought. She stood up, straightened her coat, and walked out of the cabin where passengers were already starting to retrieve their luggage. A few recognized her as the one in the video. Their eyes held a glint of curiosity mixed with a hint of suspicion. She didn't avoid their eyes, but she didn't let it touch her heart either. Outside the gate, 3 people were waiting. Times David Hale, Chief of Staff. Asterisk Maria Chavez, Communications Director. Asterisk Evelyn Hunt, the group's General Counsel. Maria stepped forward first, her eyes filled with worry. "We need to get back to the office, Naomi," Maria said. "The situation is worse than I thought." Naomi's expression did not change. "Be specific." Maria held out the tablet. The screen was filled with Tyler Brooks's video, now with over 3.8 million views. "And here's the latest," Maria said, swiping to the ABC News homepage. A large line appeared: Skylift CEO, accused of abusing emergency command to fire flight crew. Naomi read slowly. No frowns, no sighs. But David stood beside her looking at her face, and he knew, even though she stood like a rock on the outside, inside, she was still a person who felt pain. He said softly, "Naomi, don't blame yourself. No one saw the whole story." She replied softly, "The problem here, David, is they don't want to see." They ushered her out the back door of the airport, away from the media, crowding the main entrance. A black SUV was waiting. The door closed, isolating them from the noise outside. In the car, Maria began to report. "The video was edited. They only showed the part where you said you activated Phoenix. No one saw Linda kick you down to economy. No one saw your seat being taken." Naomi nodded. She didn't need to look back to know that. "Evelyn, who is always calm in a crisis, says the board has called an emergency meeting in 2 hours. Some members want you to temporarily step down until the internal investigation is complete." David jumped up. "No way, she's the only one who's kept Skylift from going bankrupt for the past 6 months." Evelyn sighed. "David, reason is one thing, public opinion is another." Maria clenched her fists. To make matters worse, Linda Rodriguez was on TV this morning. Naomi was silent. Maria swallowed before continuing. "She cried. A lot. She said you called her useless in front of everyone. She said you abused your power. She said you look down on people in the service industry. David slammed his hand on the chair. Blatant fabrication. Naomi asked softly. Senator Hollings Maria replied. He hasn't said anything yet, but his office just issued a statement saying he was just an ignorant passenger. Even though Naomi had prepared herself mentally, her chest still ached a little. Not because she lied, not because he covered up the truth, but because of the familiarity of it, the feeling of being pulled into someone else's story, then cut off from your own. The car stopped in front of the Skylift headquarters building in Manhattan. The door opens, and before Naomi's eyes, hundreds of reporters. The flash of light was like an electrical storm. People shouting, Naomi, would you fire them just because of the color of your skin? Do you think you're abusing your power? Does that qualify as a CEO? Miss Rodriguez said you insulted her. Is that true? David stood in front of Naomi, but she did not hide behind him. She walked slowly, keeping her back straight and her hands steady. Maria whispered, say something. They will use their silence against you. Naomi shook her head slightly. No, she said. I say one sentence now. It will be the headline they want. It's not the truth. Maria bit her lip. We need a media outlet. No, Naomi replied. We need the truth. They entered the elevator. As the doors closed, Naomi leaned lightly against the wall. David asked, are you okay? Naomi took a deep breath, a very long one. The scary thing isn't that they misunderstood me, she said. The scary thing is that there are people who are willing to believe the worst about me before they even know the truth. The elevator stopped on the 42nd floor of the boardroom. Maria put her hand on Naomi's shoulder. Naomi, they're going to hit hard. Naomi nodded. Let them talk. We'll get our turn. The meeting room was large with a long wooden table and dim yellow lighting, but the air inside was thick. Mr. Arthur Green, chairman of the board, opened. Naomi, we need you to explain why you used emergency powers to ground the entire crew. She stood up straight. Because they seriously violated professional ethics. And I am the one responsible for keeping passengers safe and fair. Arthur flipped through the documents. Based on the viral video, what you did looks like an abuse of power. Naomi looked at him, her eyes unwavering. Because that video isn't the whole story. Another member asked, do you discriminate against employees, Naomi? Her heart sank. Never. Another person chimed in. Linda said you insulted her. Naomi replied immediately, I just told the truth, and she didn't like it. Arthur tapped his fingers on the table. The public is against you. The stock is down 17%. The news agencies say you are the worst CEO of the year. Naomi was silent for a moment. Then she asked, if the caller that day had been a white CEO, would people have thought differently? The meeting room was silent. The question was not loud, not harsh, but like a needle piercing the invisible layer that people do not want to admit. Arthur cleared his throat. Naomi, this is not a skin color issue. She looked straight at him. It's always a color issue when people are so quick to believe the worst about a black woman before they hear her out. A deep silence. Maria, standing behind Naomi, bowed her head slightly, not out of sadness but out of pride. Arthur said, we cannot make a decision yet. The meeting is adjourned. Naomi, you have 48 hours to present evidence to clear your name. Naomi nodded. Then I will bring the truth to everyone. She turned away, back straight, not a crack. But as the conference room door closed behind her, Naomi let out a sigh, a breath she'd been holding all day. She wondered, how many more times in my life do I have to prove that I'm right, just because of who I am? David put his hand on her shoulder. I will find a way. Naomi looked out the wide glass windows that opened onto the city lights. She knew this. No one beats the storm by hiding from it. She would have to step into the eye of the storm, step by step, and act like the person she always was. Quiet, steady, and true. That evening New York was drizzling. A light, gentle rain like the breath of the city after a long day. But up on the 42nd floor of Skylift headquarters, no one felt the gentle weather. In a small conference room behind the crisis management area, Naomi Carter sat in front of a large screen displaying dozens of videos, emails, and reports. She looked at them in silence. Not the silence of the hopeless, but the silence of those who know that victory comes only when the battle is understood. David Hale entered with 2 cups of hot coffee. He placed one in front of Naomi. Have you seen the video from the gate? David asked. Naomi shook her head. Not yet. I want to prepare myself mentally before looking back at everything. David sat down next to her and said softly, "You don't have to watch it alone. We're here." She looked at him grateful but speechless. Evelyn, the corporation's lawyer, brought in a thick stack of documents. Here, she said, are passenger complaints against Linda Rodriguez over the past 10 years. Not many, but enough to show a pattern. Naomi opens the file. Each page is a small story. An African-American passenger is told she is inappropriately dressed for first class. An Asian woman is suspected of using an invalid credit card because her name is difficult to pronounce. A Latino family is asked to get off a plane for overbooking while the cabin is empty. Each story on its own is small, but placed side by side, they form a very clear connection. Naomi put the file down. Her breathing was longer, but still even. Evelyn said, "We need stronger evidence. This is just the background." Maria ran in at that moment, almost out of breath. "Found it." The group turned back. "Gate camera," Maria said, holding up her tablet. JFK sent the footage. High-quality video. A heartbeat in the room seemed to stop. Naomi nodded slightly. "Go ahead." The screen lights up. Image recorded at 7:35 p.m. Linda stood by the gate desk, smiling and talking to someone. A man approached a blue polo shirt, khakis, a gait so familiar that Naomi only needed a second to recognize him, Senator Mark Hollings. Linda bent over her desk and typed a few words. Then she printed out a new boarding pass. She handed it to Hollings. He smiled, patted her on the shoulder, and was ushered onto the plane before first-class boarding even began. David swore softly in his throat. Evelyn said in a low voice, "This is a violation of the upgrade process." Clear and intentional. Naomi continues reading. At 7:50 p.m. she appeared in the frame. The atmosphere in the meeting room froze. The screen showed Naomi standing tall, holding out her boarding pass. Linda looked at the card. Then her eyes lifted appraising, searching sharp. Maria looked at that scene and shook her head in disappointment. Just this look is enough for the entire ethics committee. In the video, Linda points back toward the economy cabin. No reason, no check, no verification. Naomi took a deep breath. Continue. As Naomi enters the first-class cabin, the video switches to an internal camera angle. The image is clear times Hollings sat in seat 1A. Asterisk Linda protected him instead of checking boarding. Asterisk Linda waved her hand back as if to dismiss Naomi. Asterisk Mark Jenkins stood behind, wringing his hands, worried but not daring to speak. One particular scene left the room speechless. Linda leaned over to Jenkins, covered her mouth, and spoke softly. There was no sound, but the lip movements were clear enough for Evelyn to read. Probably using a fake card. Evelyn slammed her fist on the table. "If you can't deny this anymore, I'll resign." Naomi saw that image, a part of a story she had no idea was happening behind her back. At first, she thought she was angry, but what she really felt was just tiredness. Tired of how people are willing to pin a false narrative on you just because of your looks. "Maria," said Naomi, "with this evidence, you don't need to apologize. You don't need to explain. You just need to let the right person talk." Naomi was silent. She stared at her face on the screen, a woman standing still, calm, but alone in the midst of a mass attack she did not choose. And she said softly, "We need to find Mark Jenkins." David nodded vigorously. "I'm working with HR. They say he's avoiding the media. He doesn't want to get involved in drama." Naomi looked at David. "No one will force him, but Mark knows what happened. And if he wants to heal, this is his chance." Maria frowned. "What about Linda? She's been crying out for justice everywhere. She's been invited to every talk show." Naomi calmly replied, "Let her speak. Truth will meet falsehood. In time." The rain began to sound louder. It tapped on the window like the rapid heartbeat of someone running away from what they feared to see. David turned on his laptop and showed the latest news. Linda was on TV. She was wearing a pastel cardigan. Her face was sad. Her eyes were fake red. "In my 30 years in the business, I have never been treated like that," she said. She called me a saboteur when I was just trying to do my job." Maria squeezed her hand. "Oh my God, she acts like an Oscar nominee," David said. "If people only saw the edited video, they would believe everything she said." Naomi stood up and walked to the glass door. The lights of New York fell on her face, calm but determined. "It's okay," she said. "My story isn't about pity. It's about the truth. Evelyn asked, "What is your plan?" Naomi turned back, her eyes shining not with anger but with direction. "We don't have to hit Linda. We don't have to hit Senator Hollings. We don't have to hit the media." She paused for a beat. "We will bring the truth to light through the only person still afraid to speak it." Maria blinked. Mark Jenkins, Naomi nodded. He saw it all, and he was the only one Linda couldn't drag down with her. David asked, "What if he refuses?" Naomi replied, "Then I will step out and tell the truth alone." There was a strength in that voice that made the group look at each other. Naomi doesn't fight with anger. She fights with persistence. The persistence of someone who has lived her whole life under the gaze of doubt and still not broken. That night, when everyone left, Naomi was left alone in the office. She turned off all the lights, leaving only the desk lamp on. She played the video again, but this time not to find fault, but to look straight at yourself. A woman who stood still, not screaming, not trembling. A woman who could bear no more insults. A woman who chose to stand her ground knowing the price would be great. Naomi whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, we start again." Her voice was not loud, not proud, just a small commitment but strong as the roots of a tree deep in the ground. She turned off the screen. The truth hunt has begun. And this time, the truth will not come to her defense. The truth will come because she calls it. The next morning, as the hazy New York sunlight tried to break through the thick clouds, Naomi Carter sat in the back seat of a black SUV. She watched the traffic outside as it slowly passed. Hurried pedestrians, honking taxis, the breath of the big city. It all blended into a heavy cacophony. Today is not a decision day. Today is not a media confrontation day. Today is a day to face the living truth. The car stopped in front of a small cafe on West 47th. It was a simple place, yellow lights, windows, slightly fogged with cold mist. David got out first, looked around, and nodded. "Mark is inside," he said. Naomi stepped out of the car. It was chilly, and the wind blew her long coat. Something in the wind reminded her of the moment she had stood in the plane cabin, alone amid the scorn. And now she was going to meet the only person who had seen it all, and yet remained silent. Not because he's bad, but because he's scared. She understands that better than anyone. The cafe door clanged open. The space inside was warm, filled with the aroma of espresso and fresh pastries. Soft jazz music played. In the middle of the room, in a corner near the window, was Mark Jenkins. He changed a lot since the day on the plane. Gone was the uniform. Gone was the forced smile of the airline staff. Just a young man with red eyes from lack of sleep and worry etched on his forehead. When he saw Naomi approaching, Mark stood up abruptly, as if he didn't know whether to run away or bow. Miss Carter," he said, his voice hoarse and strangled. Naomi placed her hands on the back of the chair opposite. "Can I sit?" Mark nodded quickly. Of course. Of course." She sat down. David stood a few feet away, close enough to offer support, far enough away so as not to frighten Mark. For a few seconds, no one said anything. The air was as thick as a fog that refused to lift. Naomi gently opened. "Mark, thanks for coming. I know it's not easy for you right now." He smiled, a short, lopsided smile. "It wasn't easy, ma'am. I lost my job. I lost my insurance. I lost my flying privileges. And the whole internet called me. Naomi continued, slowly, avoiding making him say it. "Accomplice." Mark bowed his head. "I was just following orders. I didn't think things would turn out like this." "You're scared," Naomi said, her voice soft, as if she were placing her hand over the wound, not wanting to hurt it. Mark looked up, his eyes red. "I learned to obey. Linda, she has the power on the plane. So does the captain. We are just behind the scenes. We know. Don't go against them." He swallowed, then said softly, "But when she treated you like that, I knew it was wrong. I knew, but I didn't do anything." Naomi didn't react harshly. She didn't blame him. She just looked at him long and hard. "Mark," she said, "there are moments in life when you only get one chance to be right. No one taught you that. But I'm not here to punish you." Mark closed his eyes for a second, as if the statement opened a crack of light. Naomi continued, "I'm here because I believe you're the only one willing to tell the truth. And because you're the only one who can see yourself in that truth." Mark was silent. His hands were shaking slightly. You want me to report Linda? I want you to tell me exactly what happened, Naomi replied. Nothing more, nothing less. Mark sighed, looking out the window at the still flowing crowd. His eyes were hazy. You don't understand, Mark said. If I tell you, I'll be dragged down with me. I'll never work in aviation again. Naomi tilted her head, her voice low. Not pressured, but full of truth. Mark, you have lost everything. But there is one thing you still have. What honor? That statement made Mark pause. We cannot fix mistakes by silence, Naomi said. But we can fix them by telling the truth. For a long moment Mark said nothing. He just looked down at his hands. Hands that had served thousands of passengers now trembling with a decision that would change his life. Then he looked up and asked, if I tell you, what will you promise me, Naomi? Frankly, I don't promise anything beyond my ability. But I promise one thing, I won't let you be seen as a traitor. I will let you be the one to start a new culture. Mark swallowed. You believe I can do it? Naomi smiled. A very small but warm smile. You were the only one on that flight who wavered. The only one with a conscience who reacted. That was the start of everything. She paused for a beat. And Mark, I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be brave. Mark looked down at the table, and suddenly he burst into tears. Not loud cries, just silent tears, as if months of suffering were finally having a chance to escape his body. Linda, he hiccuped. She wasn't just being mean to you, she always was. But I thought, that was normal, Naomi said softly. Wrong things repeated often enough will seem normal, until someone says enough. Mark raised his head, his eyes red and swollen. I will do it. I will tell the truth. But I don't want to be the one to push others down. I want to fix something. Naomi nodded. I know. And I have a position for you, if you're willing to take it. Mark blinked. What position? Cabin behavior trainer. Part of a new department I'm building. A small lighthouse, but one that will save many from drifting in the dark. Mark was silent for a long time. It was as if the whole future was turning before his eyes. Then, he whispered, I accept. Naomi gently reached out her hand. Mark looked at the hand. It wasn't a hand to pull him up. It was a hand to invite him forward. He held out his hand and took it. In that moment, there were no flashbulbs, no applause, no speeches. Just two people. One once silent out of fear, one once insulted but still standing, walking together into a new chapter. As Naomi stood up to leave the bar, Mark called after her, Miss Carter. She turned back. Yes, Mark said, his voice low but firm. Thank you for not looking at me like they do. Naomi smiled gently. I see you as a human being. He bowed his head, emotions flooding his face. Naomi stepped out of the cafe, the cold wind touching her cheeks. For the first time in all the chaotic days, she felt the truth was starting to be on her side. Not because she forced it, not because of power, but because courage, however small, found a place to bloom. The battle is not over. The storm is still ahead. But today Naomi Carter has her first ally. An ally from where she least expected it. One who once stood trembling by, would now stand with her. And that is the turning point of this story. That afternoon, the sky over Manhattan turned ashen gray. A strong wind blew through the skyscrapers, as if to signal something was about to happen. In the Skylift office, Naomi Carter stood in front of the glass door, watching the city sink into dusk. She knew this calm was temporary. The next big storm was brewing. Behind her, Naomi's team was preparing for a 60-minute interview that the whole country would watch. But what made everyone more nervous was the unexpected announcement from national television. Senator Mark Hollings, the man who occupied seat 1A and was illegally promoted by Linda, has just agreed to participate directly in another program. No one knows what he will say. David, who was always strong this time, also had a hint of worry in his eyes. Naomi, he said, if Hollings denies or attacks back, we will lose the initiative. Maria interjected, he is a politician. Public opinion is the atmosphere they live by. If he feels threatened, he may create a news story. Naomi still looked out, her voice as light as a breath. That's why we don't attack. We just let the truth come out. 7:00 p.m. Skylift's media room turns on all the big screens. On the news channel, the MC said urgently, Senator Hollings will appear today to respond to allegations related to Skylift Flight 308. Mark Jenkins was also in the room, sitting in the back row. He looked nervous but much calmer than the last time they had met. He knew Hollings's words could undo Naomi's efforts or inadvertently reveal the whole truth. MC opens. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Senator Mark Hollings. He appeared on screen, slicked hair, expensive suit face, full of the confidence of someone used to standing in the public spotlight. But to Naomi, that confidence was like a mask. MC asked, "Sir, public opinion is asking, were you really upgraded according to the correct procedure?" Hollings cleared his throat. "I never asked for any priority," he said. "I was just told that my seat matched seat number 1A. I had no idea who it belonged to." In the conference room, David whispered, "He is denying." Maria gritted her teeth. "Hide it all." But Naomi remained calm. She looked closely into the man's eyes. She knew when someone was covering it up. She'd seen that look all her life. MC continues. "What about you being led onto the plane before boarding begins?" Hollings smiled very slightly. "I think it was a staff mistake. I didn't ask for it." Maria shook her head. "He will blame it all on Linda." And as expected, Hollings said, "If anything goes wrong, it's not my responsibility. I was just following instructions." Mark Jenkins swallowed. This was exactly how Linda and the captain had treated him over the years. Just following instructions. But suddenly, the MC asked a question that no one could guess. "Mr. Hollings, inside sources claim that you and Linda Rodriguez have known each other for a long time. Is this true?" Hollings's face stiffened just for a second, but enough for everyone in the room to see. Naomi tilted her head, a familiar sign when she began to see gaps. Hollings laughed to cover it up. "I met a lot of people on my business trips. It would be too broad to say I knew anyone. I can't remember who was who." MC continues to attack. But the video from the camera shows the two people chatting very friendly. Hollings clenched his fists. "That's how I treat people. I don't favor anyone," Naomi said softly. "He's starting to lose his cool." Maria nodded vigorously. "Yes," he said, voice rising. "Unnaturally." MC makes the final statement, "Sir. If everything was according to procedure, why did you ask your communications team to completely deny any connection with Miss Linda Rodriguez?" As soon as Skylift announced its internal investigation, the entire Skylift conference room fell silent. Hollings did not answer immediately. There was a silence so long that one could hear someone putting down a pen on the desk in the studio. His face tensed, the veins in his temples standing out. He said, "I have no further comment on that matter." MC smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Hollings. The program ends." Maria stood up. "He's hiding something." "Obviously," David said. "He wasn't just hiding. He was scared. The last sentence shows he received legal warning." Naomi walked slowly to the screen, placed her hands on the edge of the table, and looked at the face of the senator who had just come off the airwaves. "He didn't fight back," she said. "He didn't blame me. He just retreated." David asked, "So is that good or bad?" Naomi replied after a moment of contemplation, "Good for the truth. Bad for Linda." Just then, Maria's phone rang continuously. She opened her eyes wide. "Naomi. Breaking news." "What's up?" The Ledger's chief reporter just broke the news. Senator Hollings' office has agreed to cooperate with Skylift's internal investigation. David blurted out, "What?" Naomi said nothing. She just sat down, her hands clasped together. Maria continued reading. "Hollings admitted there were shortcomings in the boarding process and is willing to provide information to avoid unwanted misunderstandings." David frowned. This way of speaking is a placating script. Not confrontational, but not full admission of fault either. Naomi whispered. That was a signal he would no longer protect Linda. The room fell into silence for a few seconds. Mark Jenkins, who had been silent since the beginning of the session, said softly, "Things are changing." Naomi looked at him, her eyes warm but resolute. "It's not over yet, Mark. Linda won't sit still, and the media won't let up." "So what do we do next?" Maria asked. Naomi stood up, took a deep breath. Not hurried, not afraid. "In 2 days," she said, "we're on television. Not to attack anyone, not to justify ourselves." She looked at each person in the room, but to tell the real story, in our own voices. Then she turned to Mark. and Mark will stand with me. Mark flinched slightly, but his gaze was no longer frightened. It had something else steadier, softer. He nodded. I will. Naomi smiled. For the first time in days, it wasn't a smile of exhaustion. It was a smile of recovery. Okay, she said. We're about to get to the important part. Outside the window, New York City lit up, as if to signal that the next chapter would be more than just a defensive battle. Naomi Carter isn't just reclaiming her story. She's about to rewrite it entirely. The morning of the interview, the Los Angeles sky was as clear as a wash of water. Sunlight streamed through the large windows of the Skylift headquarters building. In her 38th floor office, Naomi Carter stood before a mirror. She wore no elaborate jewelry, no power jacket. Just a simple navy blazer, her hair pulled back into a bun, and eyes as calm as a lake before a storm. Today is not a day to be stronger than anyone else. Today is a day to be real. David walked in, tablet in hand, a slightly worried look in his eyes. Naomi, the national channel just sent out a notification. They predict tonight's interview will break viewership records. Maria also walked in, her voice small but excited. They say, the teaser alone has over 3 million views. Naomi nodded slightly. It's okay. The more people see it, the more chance the truth has to be understood correctly. Maria came over and gently adjusted Naomi's collar. I want you to remember something, she said. The audience won't just hear your words. They'll hear your emotions in the silences. Naomi smiled, gentle as morning dew. Emotions will do their part. I just need to be honest. By 6:30 p.m., the Skylift team was in the studio waiting room. The space was brightly lit, cold from the air conditioning, filled with the sound of the crew's hurried footsteps and calls to each other over the walkie-talkie. Mark Jenkins sat in the corner, his hands clasped together. He wore a pale blue shirt, his tie a little crooked with nervousness. Naomi approached. Mark, she called softly. He looked up, his eyes both grateful and fearful. I don't know if I screwed up, he gasped. Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was low, warm, slow, a speaking rhythm reserved for someone who was shaking. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be genuine. The audience will see that. Mark took a deep breath. I'm just afraid they'll think I betrayed Linda. Naomi looked at him, non-judgmental. Mark, sometimes telling the truth is the only way to not betray yourself. There was a long silence between them. Then Mark nodded, his gaze growing heavier. I will do my best. 7:00 p.m. The stage lights come up. Naomi stepped onto the set, facing dozens of cameras trained on her. She could hear her heart pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was like a warrior preparing for battle. Only this time her weapon was calm. The host, Rachel Simmons, stepped forward to greet me. Her voice was professional, both soft and sharp. We are honored to be here tonight with Dr. Naomi Carter, CEO of Skylift Airlines. The audience applauded lightly. Naomi sat down. She put her hands on her thighs, straightened her back, and looked at Rachel, but not away from the camera. The signal light turns red. The broadcast begins. Rachel began, Dr. Carter, the story of Skylift Flight 308 has created an unprecedented wave of controversy. Many say you abused your power. Others say you were discriminated against. Today, we want to hear directly from you. What really happened on that plane that day? Naomi took a deep breath. That breath is the moment that begins the dialogue with the whole country. She said, I flew back after 72 hours of nonstop negotiations. I just wanted to sit down, have a glass of water, and get some sleep. But when I got into the first-class cabin where I had to ticket my name on the system, I was told that seat wasn't for me. Rachel asked, what did you feel at that time? Naomi paused for a beat. The entire studio leaned toward her, wanting to hear the hurt often hidden. I felt like I was being seen, but not as the real me, but as an image that they thought I fit. She looked straight into the camera. That feeling doesn't just happen on planes. It happens every day to a lot of people who look like me. Many people in the studio bowed their heads as if touching a truth too close. Rachel continued, but why did you call the operations department and request the suspension of the entire crew? Naomi bowed her head slightly. Because I reacted with fatigue, not with clarity. The room was silent. She spoke slowly. Her voice so soft it was as if she were telling a story to a child. I am not proud of the way I acted. I used my power when I was vulnerable, and I apologize for that. At this moment, Maria stood backstage almost wanting to cry. Not because Naomi was weak, but because she was strong enough to speak the truth. Rachel continued, "But you don't apologize for the decision, do you?" Naomi looked up, her eyes as sharp as water, reflecting the sky. "No, because I'm not wrong in that part." A slight hiss echoed in the auditorium, not in protest, but in surprise at the frankness. Naomi continued, "I'm not wrong to stand up for my right to be treated fairly. I'm not wrong to demand transparency. And I'm not wrong to refuse to step back just because someone thinks I'm not worthy." Rachel looked at Naomi, slightly taken aback by the sincerity but firmness. "Dr. Carter, some people say you bring race into a service issue. What do you think?" Naomi did not dodge. "I didn't bring it in. It was already there." She recounted the incident calmly, without dramatizing or accusing, just reporting as a witness to her own truth. When Naomi paused, Rachel moved on to the most important part. "Today, you brought a witness. Someone who decided to speak. Mark Jenkins, please." Mark stepped out. The light on him made him flinch. But when he saw Naomi smile slightly, he straightened up. Rachel asked, "Mark, you saw it all. Can you tell the audience what really happened?" Mark glanced at Naomi, then back at the camera. He swallowed. "There is a truth. I can't keep it in my heart anymore." The audience leaned forward. "Linda wasn't just wrong that day. She's been doing this for years. I've seen her discriminate. I stayed silent because I was afraid." He took a deep breath, his voice trembling but clear. "But that day, she wanted to push a black woman, a passenger with a valid ticket, out of her seat. Not because of a system error, but because she thought the other person was more important." Rachel froze for a few seconds. The whole studio was silent. Mark continued, this time louder, "And I didn't say anything. That's what bothers me the most." Naomi gently placed her hand on Mark's, a small movement, but the camera caught it all. Rachel turned back to Naomi. "Do you have anything to say to Mark?" Naomi looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "I want to say that courage begins the moment you stop being afraid of yourself." Mark bowed his head, tears welling up in his eyes. The interview ended with applause. No noise, no explosion, just a deep, heavy applause, like acknowledgement. Naomi walked behind the stage. David ran over first. "Naomi, you just changed the game." Maria hugged the notebook to her chest. "You don't just tell a story, you make people feel it." Mark stood behind, his eyes still red, but his voice soft. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Naomi looked at the three people, like looking at a team just built from the first bricks, honest, imperfect, but strong because it dares to face the truth. "Tomorrow," Naomi said, her voice firmer than ever, "we start over. Not to right the wrongs, but to right the wrongs." The morning after the interview, Los Angeles woke up with a slight chill, but the air in the Skylift office was as hot as a stirred-up anthill. When Naomi walked in, she found the entire media team packed into the conference room, all eyes glued to the large screen on the wall. Maria ran back. "Naomi, you have to see this." On the screen, social media platforms are exploding. Number stand with Naomi. Number let Mark speak. Number Skylift truth. The hashtag is trending across Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. The video of Naomi saying "I don't bring race into it. It's already there" has been shared more than 2 million times. David exclaimed, "I'm rewriting the story in my own voice." But that joy did not last long. Maria zoomed in on another video on the screen, one that the team didn't expect to see at all. Linda Rodriguez. She appeared on the live stream with light makeup that said, "I just cried, but I can still stand up." Her eyes were red but sharper than a knife blade. She began in a trembling voice, "I don't have a lawyer. I don't have union protection. I'm just a woman doing my job for 30 years. David laughed sarcastically. "She's playing the classic victim." But Naomi raised her hand, signaling silence. She wanted to hear everything. Linda continued, "Dr. Carter, she used a racist narrative to justify her authoritarian behavior. She cost me my job, ruined my life, all because I followed the right procedures." Maria turned up the volume. Linda's voice rose, trembling and sharp. She said, "I was discriminated against. So, who called the highest authority and demanded my immediate dismissal in front of the whole cabin? who made me get dragged off the plane like a criminal who is using me as a scapegoat to build a good image for themselves. Naomi remained calm, but Maria looked at her worriedly. Are you okay? Naomi nodded. I knew she would do this. Linda continued her attack. And Mark, a naive child, she lured him into being a witness. He didn't understand what was happening. He was used as a tool. Mark sat in the back of the conference room, hearing that. His hands balled into fists. But he didn't argue. He just endured it in silence, for once not out of fear, but because he knew the truth wouldn't need screaming to survive. Maria was upset. We must respond immediately. A press release, a response clip, an explanatory article. Naomi shook her head. No. Don't overturn a lie with impatience. David asked. So, what do we do? Naomi looked at the screen where Linda had just shed a calculating-looking tear. We let her talk until she contradicts herself. But the unexpected happened next. As Linda ended the video, a reporter from the Ledger immediately posted exclusive. Linda Rodriguez was warned internally for favoritism when upgrading seats. Maria gasped. Leaked information. Who provided it? David checked the list of people who had access to the old records. Not from our side. Someone is turning Linda around in a very professional way. Naomi frowned, her eyes narrowing slightly, a habit she had whenever she sensed something was out of place. David, check it out. The article was published so quickly and so timely. Who do you think is behind it? Naomi didn't answer. But in her mind appeared the image of the man with the sophisticated political smile, Senator Mark Hollings. If Linda sinks, he floats. If Linda lies, he clears. If Linda fights back, he can use it to play the cod in the middle role. Like an old politician. While the team analyzed the article, Naomi stepped out onto the balcony. The morning air still smelled of dew. She needed a moment of silence, a place where there was only the sound of the wind and her own breathing. Mark stepped out behind her. Naomi, he said softly. Did I make things worse? She turned back, looked at him with a light gaze, as if placing a hand on the shoulder of the self-reproaching person. No, Mark. You brought the truth to light. But all light makes the darkness more prominent. Mark sat down on the bench opposite. I am not used to being criticized in front of millions of people. Google my name, and you will see comments calling me a traitor. Naomi smiled slightly. You know, Mark, sometimes people scold you not because you're wrong, but because you're not like them. Mark looked at her, his eyes a little brighter. You have experienced that many times, right? Naomi smiled sadly. Enough to stop trying to explain to people that I'm harmless. A text message alert sounded. David ran out. Naomi, we have a big problem. They returned to the office. On the screen was a leaked internal email from Linda Rodriguez to Senator Hollings, subject about that seat upgrade. Maria read in disbelief. Holy shit. She really contacted Hollings. Email says, Mark, I did what I agreed to. I upgraded your seat, but now I'm being pushed into a hole. You have to protect me, like you said. David rolled his eyes. If this evidence is made public, Linda is finished. Maria asked. But who sent this email to the press? Who wanted Linda and Hollings to go down together? Naomi looked out the glass door. The sunlight reflected in her eyes like a thin layer of glass. This is not Linda's game. David asked again. So, Naomi replied, her voice low and very slow. Hollings is sacrificing Linda to preserve his career. Maria was startled. You mean, the email was intentionally released by the Hollings faction? Naomi nodded slightly. Politics has no friends, only convenience. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Mark whispered. So, Linda not only opposed us, she was also betrayed by the person she protected. Naomi looked at him. Her eyes were not gloating, not triumphant. That's why I never wanted to fight their way. David asked. So, what's our next step? Naomi exhaled, soft but long, like an invisible rock had been lifted from her chest. We're not targeting Linda, and we're not targeting Hollings. We don't need to blacken anyone. She looked at the team. We just have to tell the truth. But this time, the whole truth. No cutting out the parts that make it hard for us to hear. Maria nodded vigorously. Okay, straight to the internal hearing. Reveal all processes, vulnerabilities, misconduct, including the parts of the system itself we need to fix. Naomi replied, That's right. No hiding, no avoiding. Mark asked softly, "Aren't you afraid? They'll use that against you." Naomi smiled gently, a smile that made one feel as if the wind had calmed down. "Mark, mistakes don't kill leaders. Dishonesty kills them." Just then, Maria's phone screen lit up. She frowned, then opened it wide to the middle of the room. A new video is going viral. Linda was sobbing, but this time she didn't blame Naomi. She said, "Hollings, he abandoned me. I protected him. I upgraded his seat. And now he blames it all on me." The room went silent. David slowly. "This is an unexpected explosion," Maria whispered. She publicly announced that she was upgrading the cheat. Naomi watched the video, but her first feeling was not relief, but sympathy. There was something in Linda's voice, however bitter, however twisted, that was the voice of a woman crushed by the very system she thought protected her. Mark looked at Naomi. "You feel sorry for her?" Naomi replied, her voice sad, but not weak. "I don't justify wrongdoing, but I understand what it feels like to have someone you protect and turned against you." She breathed lightly, her eyes deep, "And that is why we must fix this system, not to get revenge on anyone, but to prevent the tragedy from happening again." That day, Naomi realized, this story is not just my story. It is not just Mark's story. It is not just Linda's story or Hollings' story. But it is the story of an entire system, a system that forces people to choose between silence and survival. A system that needs to be reworked. And Naomi knew, the hardest part is still to come. On the morning of the hearing, Los Angeles was covered in a thin layer of fog, like the breath of a city that had not yet fully awakened. Skylift headquarters was unusually quiet. No laughter, no conversation in the hallways. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something bigger than an administrative decision. Naomi Carter walked into the internal hearing room where nearly 24 people were seated in a semicircle: union representatives, the legal department, flight supervisors, and ethics board members. She didn't sit down right away. She stood still for a second, taking a deep breath, as if to bring into the room not only the power of a CEO, but also the calm of a person preparing to face her own mistakes. David and Maria sat behind her like two silent pillars. Mark Jenkins was in the back row, his hands clasped, but his eyes shining. The first time he had attended a meeting without his eyes looking for somewhere to hide. The chair, Ellen Paris, a famously stern person, opened. "Dr. Carter, today we will be conducting a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding Flight 308 and the subsequent response. This is not a trial. This is a hearing." Naomi nodded. "I'm ready." The hearing began with the presentation of cabin video, passenger reports, complaints, and Linda and Captain Gibson's HR records. Everything was presented coldly, bluntly, and uncompromisingly. But Naomi did not react. She braced herself to listen to the whole thing again from beginning to end, like a pain untaped. When the video showed Naomi standing in front of seat 1A being rejected and looked down upon, Mark turned away, as if he couldn't bear his silence at that moment. Naomi, on the other hand, looked straight at the screen. No evasion, no excuses. Mrs. Ellen asked the first question. "Dr. Carter, in this video, we see clearly the insult you received. However, you responded by requesting the suspension of the entire crew within 90 seconds. What would you say about that decision?" Naomi replied in a calm but weighty voice, "I didn't react with reason. I reacted with years of fatigue." The room went silent. Naomi continued, "Being discriminated against is not new to me, but that day, I was too exhausted to stay calm. I should have asked to stop investigate before making a decision. I was wrong." The council members did not expect her to admit it so quickly. A few people looked at each other, but Naomi continued, this time her voice as firm as rock. "However, just because I'm wrong about the way I do it doesn't mean I'm wrong about the meaning." Mrs. Ellen leaned over. "Can you be more specific?" "What I mean is the crew's behavior that day was wrong. And if I didn't react, it would continue to happen to the next person like me." A union representative interjected, "But grounding entire crews without a transparent process is dangerous." Naomi nodded. "That's right, and that's why I'm here today, not to protect myself, but to fix the process, so that no one else has to use their personal power when the system doesn't work." The whole room took notes. Next up is Mark Jenkins. He stood up, his voice was a little shaky, but his eyes were no longer evasive. I was the one standing there. The one who saw it all and did nothing. A sigh came from somewhere in the room. Mark continued more smoothly. This time, I didn't stay silent because I agreed. I stayed silent because I was afraid of Linda, because I was afraid of the captain, because I was afraid of losing my job. I just wasn't brave enough. He looked towards Naomi. But when I saw what happened next, I understood that silence is also a choice, and I made the wrong choice. A union representative asked, "Do you feel pressured by Dr. Carter to testify?" Mark shook his head vigorously. "No. She gave me a chance. For the first time, someone saw me as someone with a voice, and not just a shadow behind the chief attendant." Naomi bowed her head slightly, not proudly, but moved. The climax of the hearing came mid-morning. A council member held up a new document. This is an email between Linda Rodriguez and Senator Mark Hollings. It shows intentional, unauthorized upgrading. "Dr. Carter, were you aware of this relationship before?" Naomi replied. "No. I only found out after the incident spread and an internal investigation began." The member asked again, "If you had known, would you have handled it differently?" The whole room turned to Naomi. That moment was like the moment a string was stretched, taut, waiting to snap. Naomi was silent for a few seconds. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not from pressure, but to find the right words to tell the truth. When people are offended, they tend to defend themselves. If I had known Linda was gaming the system, I would have still called for an investigation. But I didn't do it in the right way. She opened her eyes. I let my emotions guide me in that moment. And that's not the standard I want to set for those who come after me. Mrs. Ellen looked straight at Naomi. "Dr. Carter, we need to know. Do you regret it?" The room slowed down. Naomi replied in a voice as deep as the waves, "I regret using my power at the wrong time. But I do not regret standing up against discrimination." The whole room shook slightly like an invisible echo. At the end of the hearing, Ellen asked the most important question. "If we asked you to rewrite the process, what would you change?" Naomi stood up. She picked up a pen and walked to the whiteboard. "All follow." She wrote 3 words: transparency, justice, and humanity. Then she turned back, explaining each word: transparency, so that no one is judged by emotion; fairness, so that every passenger, regardless of skin color or social position, is respected; humanity, so that people in this industry don't have to live in fear of doing the right thing. Maria stood back looking at Naomi and saw that this was not a speech. This was an oath. A council member asked, "Do you think you have what it takes to lead this change?" Naomi breathed a sigh of relief. "No one can do it alone, but I will find enough people so we can do it together." The hearing ended after nearly 4 hours. As Naomi left the room, people parted. No one spoke. Some bowed their heads. Others looked at her with new respect. Mark ran after. "Naomi, what do you think will happen?" She looked at him, then looked away down the long hallway ahead. "I'm not sure," she said. "But for the first time since it happened, I feel like we're on the right track." Mark smiled. A light smile like someone who had just escaped a heavy rain. David and Mary came forward on either side like 2 wings. David said, "Whatever the outcome, you just did something not many CEOs dare to do." Maria added, "I'm not protecting my image. I'm protecting the truth." Naomi nodded, neither proud nor smug. She just said, "We have one more part, the hardest part." Maria asked, "What is that?" Naomi looked out the glass doors, where the late afternoon sunlight was shining on the skylift glass tower. "Healing." That day, Naomi left the building without bodyguards, without a luxury car, just walked out onto the sidewalk like a normal person. An elderly woman, a stranger, stopped before Naomi. She gently touched her hand. "Daughter, thank you." Naomi was a little surprised why. She replied in a trembling voice, "Because you dare to say what many of us endure all our lives. But no one listens." She stood still, speechless. But her eyes softened. Not because she was supported, but because in the end, she knew she wasn't fighting just for herself. She fights for all those who were once considered out of place. A week after the hearings, the skies over Los Angeles were clearer than they had been in days. Thin clouds drifted lazily, as if the city were breathing a sigh of relief after weeks of heavy breathing. The skylift building was brighter too, not because of the lights, but because of the air. People walked through the hallways with a strange calm, as if they understood they were living in a new chapter, one where the truth was no longer locked in silence. Naomi Carter stood on the 40th floor, looking down at LAX International Airport in the distance. Planes were taking off one after another, like news stories flying into the future. David stepped forward and said softly, "Naomi, the council has sent in its final decision." She turned back, frowning slightly despite looking calm. Her heart was still beating slowly but strongly, as if preparing for every possibility. "Read it," she said. David opened the document, his voice low, but somewhat relieved. The investigation concluded. The crew engaged in clear misconduct. Captain Gibson and Linda Rodriguez were severely disciplined and are no longer permitted to work in cabin leadership roles. Naomi was silent. David continued reading. "On the CEO's side, that is you. The board acknowledged that your emotional reaction led to a quick decision, but they appreciated your honesty, transparency, and your initiative to admit your mistakes and correct them. There was no disciplinary action. The board asked you to lead the restructuring of the behavioral process across the system." Maria breathed a sigh of relief. "So, you're not just going through a crisis. You're being tasked with leading change." Naomi looked down at the page. A feeling of both heaviness and lightness spread through her chest, like putting down a rock, but at the same time picking up another larger one. She asked, "What do they say about Mark?" David smiled. "Mark was reinstated. They took him on record as a witness. And they want to invite him to join the new flight attendant training program." Naomi nodded slightly. "Okay, get Mark here for me." 10 minutes later, Mark Jenkins walked in. He was still the young flight attendant with the gentle eyes and hesitant smile. But there was something new in that smile, now bravery. He asked Naomi, "What was the result?" She handed him the document. Mark read it, and tears suddenly fell down his cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me a chance to start over." Naomi stepped forward, placing her hand on his shoulder with a warmth rarely seen in someone holding such a high position in a giant corporation. "It wasn't me. It was you. I opened the door. You're the one who dared to walk through it." Mark bowed his head, not in shame, but in gratitude. That afternoon, Naomi held a staff meeting in the large hall. The lights were soft yellow, hundreds of people sat in rows, each with a different expression, worried, hopeful, curious, even skeptical. Naomi steps onto the stage. No fancy microphones. No flashing LED panels. Just Naomi, the real thing. She opened with a sentence that made the whole hall silent. "We were wrong. Not just a few people. The whole system." Some people bowed their heads. Others nodded slowly. But Naomi continued, her voice softer. "But mistakes are opportunities to rebuild from the ground up." She told the story, no blame, no accusations, no flattery. Like someone who has walked through a long night to see the dawn. "None of us are asked to be perfect, but we are all asked to be kind." That sentence made the whole hall quiet down. She introduces Skylift's new program times, zero tolerance for discrimination. Asterisk. Retrain the entire crew. Asterisk. Absolute transparency in the seat upgrade process. Asterisk. Anonymous feedback system for employees. Asterisk. Humanity coordination team in passenger service. And the first position in the training program was announced by Naomi. Mark Jenkins will be leading the course, The Courage of Voice. Because no one understands the fear of silence better than someone who has been silent. The whole room applauded, not explosively, just quietly, but it was the kind of applause that went to the heart. Mark stood up, his face red, but his eyes shining with pride. After the meeting, Naomi walked down the skylift hallway, a hallway that had once felt heavier than the sky. But today, it felt wide open and light. A young employee approached her. His voice, timid. "Dr. Carter, I used to think you were just like other leaders. But today, I learned something." Naomi smiled. "What is it?" "That the strongest person is not the one who makes no mistakes, but the one who does not run away from his mistakes." Naomi touched the girl's arm lightly. "Thank you. Please help me keep this culture going. Skylift needs more people like you." The girl nodded vigorously, her eyes shining with new confidence. In the evening, when everyone had gone home, Naomi sat alone in her office, looking out at the city. The street lights where on the traffic flowed like the pulse of life. In front of her was an empty chair, a replica one. A chair that the design studio had built to symbolize the new campaign. Everyone deserves a place. Naomi reached out to touch the headrest. No more feeling offended. No more lingering pain. There is only one truth. She made it. Not by winning over others, but by understanding yourself and heal yourself. She closed her eyes for a moment, peacefully, then opened its smile. Tomorrow begins a new chapter. Before leaving the office, Naomi recorded a short video, one that would play at the end of the internal campaign and be released to the public. Her voice is soft, very suitable for TTS rhythm. The story of Flight 308 is not just my story. It is a reminder that each of us has a moment when we must choose to be silent or to speak up, to stand still or to step forward, to endure or to change. She paused for a beat. If you have ever felt the pain of being slighted, I hope this story gives you hope. If you have ever made the mistake of reacting out of hurt, I hope this story gives you new direction. And if you have ever witnessed injustice but didn't know what to do, I hope you find your voice. She smiled softly. We can't fix the world in a day, but we can start by making a kind choice today. Finally, she said the final sentence softly and warmly. Thank you for being here and for listening. Video fades out, and the story ends not with victory, not with revenge, but with a light of healing. If this story touched you in any way, leave a like, a share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new stories. Thank you for sticking with me until the end.